But I just wanted to welcome you to the new debrief. Sorry about this. We found out half an hour ago that it would not work with this computer, so I had to run all the way home to get mine.
Thank you.
So we'll see how this goes. I want to introduce, well, just to briefly explain it. The new debrief is a program of the South Carolina Confederate Relic Room Military Museum. We normally have these at the museum, but the room we use for that has been shut down for the past year, won't be open for another few months. So we've been having these out in the community, which is a lot of fun. We've had a few of them at the Richmond County Library. This is our second one here, and we've really been excited about the turnout we're getting. And I don't know how many of them you are, but it's more than we're used to. So this is Mr. Kim's kid, Stacy. He's not a British soldier, but he has fought the Battle of Camden a number of times himself. I got to go to one of those reenactments sometime, and he's going to be speaking to you on the subject of that battle. Afterwards, we got a bunch of free passes, so you can go check out the museum yourself and take it away.
Thank you everybody for coming. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
And the uniform I'm wearing right now is the Volunteers of Ireland. They were a loyalist regiment, very, very hard fighting. Been fighting since the beginning of the war. And they were mostly raised by American Catholics. And they joined the British cause because they could make more money and stay alive longer. Charles Baxley was a friend of mine. He's the reason I moved to this area 6 years ago. Some of you know him. He's responsible for the 250th, the Governor's Commission, and many other projects. The man was a brilliant lawyer, brilliant historian, and he got all these historic organizations funded, running, sponsored, got the word out there, and also made sure for the 250th, if you're from different counties, you should have a 250th committee someplace. Go online, with your city or county and see who's in charge. There's millions of dollars out there in grants for local communities to work on their local history of the American Revolution. So any of these later on, you can leave me your email. I'll send these to you. And the official title, and some PR guy came up with this, South Carolina 250th Sesquicentennial Commission. Say that after 2 beers. That's the big one that has all the money for everybody. Okay, let's get started. So much for the commercials. Okay, Battle of Camden in their own words. Most of you are already here when I was talking that there's tons and tons of original documents from the Americans, the rebels, and from the British. British ones are far more reliable. And so what I did was go through all my different books and documents and merged what was going on. The biggest problem I had was I originally had 50 slides. So the first thing I had to do is spend 3 days editing, sending them out to like Jim Paiush, who's one of the main authors on the Battle of Camden, and say, Jim, help me edit this thing down and make sure I didn't make any stupid errors, which of course I did. So, a little bit of background. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Yikes. Back out. I didn't like that at all. Oh, cool, the music plays. I didn't know if it was going to work. There we go. Come on. Okay. Pretty much what was going on before the Battle of Camden, 1780 was a busy, busy year. What you see in blue were American victories, and red were Crown victories. So I don't want to spend a lot of time, but you can see how it was going back and forth. And the militias in the backcountry near over the mountain men were basically involved in a civil war. in the backcountry. So what happens is, by the end of 1780, about 2/3 of the menfolk are gone or dead, either from combat, capture. Disease is the main killer. For everyone that died of wounds, 10 died of disease. Smallpox, malaria, scarlet fever, yellow fever, measles, and mostly dysentery. For your young ones who don't know what dysentery is, you poop yourself to death. Not very pleasant. So this is the background going on. And rates constantly. The British have little supply points all over the place, going up to 96, going up to Chiraw towards Charlotte. And every place where there's a road, every 12 to 15 miles, you have to have a little fortification. And that's where the supply wagons logger off and protect themselves from raids. So that's about the speed a team of horses or oxen can travel in one day. Now what the rebels do is they try to raid these places, mainly for food. Especially you get in the Pine Barrens, where around Camden, there's hardly any farms. They're barely subsistent. So the Americans, when they came down, and we'll get this a little later, are starving. They can't transport enough food. Okay, the location. If you're not familiar with Camden, 30-minute drive that way. You'll take I-20, get off at the Camden exit. The battlefield is 7 miles outside of town. And oddly enough, here's the Battle of Hopkirk Hill, which comes later. There was a skirmish at Logtown, and I live right between the two of them. So that's kind of cool. And you, later on, if you want, you can. This is a really good program. You can download on your cell phone. And here's some more modern archaeological evidence of the trail systems that go through the park. And they're highly visible. Walking trails are comfortable. You need a good pair of shoes. There's benches, but you can go from point A to point B, and there's big modern signs. And here's roughly the battle area, and we know from the archaeology exactly where the lines are now. How we do that is we find the musket balls. There weren't any cannonballs, but there was grape shot, which are smaller ones. And you can see where they were dropped while the soldiers panicking. And you can also see when the Americans are running away, they're throwing everything they can. Please don't fail me now. They're throwing their rifles, their cartridges, and oddly enough, most of the American militia hardly had a few runs between them. So that was difficult for us to sort out. Okay, good stuff. Now, the American forces. Mr. Gates, Major General. The hero of Saratoga. Well, Benedict Arnold and Morgan were the ones that were the heroes of Saratoga. He was incompetent, but highly politically connected. He wanted Washington's job, but Washington had more connections from Virginia. Then you have Baron de Kalb. Modern research shows, in fact, he was a baron. Earlier writers said, well, he made it up. No, he didn't. And then John Armstrong was in charge of light infantry. And it's interesting, we have a lot of photographs of these guys that survived. Now here's his command. You've got the Continentals, you've got Mordecai Gist, William Small, Tiffin, and then Cathaway, most of these guys, 2nd Maryland, 1st Maryland, and then you've got the militia that were originally attached. When he starts coming down from Hillsborough, he doesn't have hardly any militia with him. He's going to pick those up as he comes down, he hopes. So Marion, he's technically attached, but he's only got like 20 guys. I believe he has more than that, but they come and go, and he's out there just harassing the British convoys. Sumter was given a cannon, and the day after the battle, he captures a British supply train and captures a whole bunch of prisoners. And what happens is Tarleton catches him and slaughters him. Sumter's in his underwear and has to run. You can't get sloppy and lazy in a war, I can tell you from experience. Now the order of battle. Again, if you want these slides, I'll send them to you. There's a lot of information on here. I'd have to put my glasses on. But roughly what we have is all the Americans together runs approximately, according to some American sources, 4,100. Some of my friends who are experts say it's closer to 3,400. But some even go lower, some higher. Because the records are just so incomplete. We don't know. It's all guesswork. Because the guys who are writing afterwards, who survived the battle, are just going, well, I think I had, or maybe we did. And they're writing these after-action reports up. So a lot of confusion in their documents. Okay, Cayce, one of our American heroes, trapped by his own hubris. That means his own ego gets in his way. He's tripping over his own ego. And he goes to his officers and says, what do we do now? We're getting down. The supply wagons are way miles and miles behind. There's not enough food to feed everybody when the militia starts showing up. They hit the pine barrens. There's no forage. There's no food that they could rob. And this is typically what happens. The rebels go up to a farm, preferably a loyalist, but not necessarily, and say, we're taking all your food. They go, well, how are we going to survive? Our seed corn. We don't care. We're hungry. Well, you going to pay me? Well, we'll give you a promissory note. If we win the war, we'll pay you. The Brits come in, and they say, we're taking half your food, and we're giving you coin. Real hard money. So everybody wanted to sell to the British. Didn't matter which side your loyalties were. So what he does, he's got nothing left. All his officers don't say anything. They're intimidated. They don't know what to do. And so he says, we'll go down to Wrigley's Mill, which is 13 miles from the battlefield. And originally, he was thinking about going to Hobkirk Hill, which is only about 2 miles, maybe not even that, from the fortified town of Camden. And if you know the visitor center, off to the left, you'll see a big pasture area. That's where the town originally was. And you'll see a little bit of a stockade there that they're redoing it. So he decides to attack Camden for supplies. His men are starving. They're ragged. One of the quotations was they look like scarecrows. They don't have much ammunition. And they're really sad shape. And he comes down the Waxhaw Road, which is about 12 feet wide, ruts. And what he does is he has to come down in 3 columns. And mostly they march at night because of the heat. August. Yeah. So they're coming up both sides, and the ones coming down, they have to keep coming in because of the swampy area and going back out. So they're only moving 10 miles a day, maybe 12. I'll have to get my calculator out. Cornwallis has intelligence. He knows he's coming. He knows where he's coming from. He knows what roads he's on. So what he does is he brings reinforcements up from Charleston, and also from 96, they're bringing reinforcements in. So here you can get just a rough idea. Here's Marion out here causing trouble. Sumter trying to interdict supply lines. Here's 96. Camden area is right here. And Charleston down here. It's a 2-day march. A hard march. Because they can do 30 miles a day. And the roads coming up were much better. They were maintained. Okay, Gates moves on Camden. DeKalb was the commanding officer until Gates shows up. And Gates has a letter from Congress saying, you're shafted, he's in charge, you'll take orders from him. Gates refuses to take cavalry support. He had Washington's light cavalry in the area, he had mounted militia, and he takes 9 guns, which means they're either pulled by 2 horses. If they're 6-pounder, you need 4 to 6 horses. If they're being drugged by oxen, you take 2 or 3 oxen. But oxen will only go a few miles at a time, and then they'll sit down. Then you gotta let them rest, and you gotta park and get them up again. They used to work with oxen. So Sumter has good intelligence. He knows what's going on. But Gates won't listen to him. Plus, he's pretty much a catch. And Marion, 20 men, I mentioned that. And then Sumter, the other side of the Water River, interdicts the supplies coming up. Gates officers are terribly confused. What happens is the commanding officer normally gives guidance on what he wants to happen. He didn't do this. And they're told to march south. They're still confused. March where? How? How are we going to eat? Where are we going? We don't know. We'll pick up militia on the way. Okay, here's what the roads look like. The blue is actually quotations from the Americans. Gates rations of meat, bread, molasses for his men, substitute for rum. Traditionally, before you go into battle, they give you a shot of rum, about 4 ounces. You mix it half with water. That rum is almost 90% alcohol. You're not going to be feeling fear too much being that drunk. So before that, the last of the food before it gave out was eating mash. That's a whole other lecture. And dumplings, and then the molasses, green peaches, green corn that they could scavenge. They all had diarrhea. So on top of being raggedy, bone-tired, afraid of getting into a fight, and now you're bottom. Every 5 minutes, and I've had dysentery, off into the bushes, come back, go another half mile, back to the bushes. So by the time they get to Camden, these guys are in really pitiful shape. Gates, according to the British, mentioned that they knew he was coming. They thought he had about 7,000 men with the militia that was coming in. They sprung up like a multitude of toads after a heavy rain. Some of you have witnessed that down here, usually in the spring, and you hear all the croaking. Same thing. The pine barrens. The trees were actually much bigger. This is the battlefield site. The trees, 2 guys couldn't hug the tree. And there was a double canopy above it, so it was dark down below. Hardly any scrub grows. And then the road, this is actually the original road. That's what it would have looked like, although with the trees this big around. And this is part of the walking trail that we've established. Okay, they're coming down at night because of the heat, and this happens all the time. At cow pens, it happened. At Utah Springs, it happened. Because both sides are moving at night. You can't see, but if you go back on your computer, you can see what the face of the moon is. And invariably, the moon was bright, if not full, when they're making these marches. And what they're coming down to is towards Wrigley's Mill. They're spread out, they're lost, there's no compass, there's no GPS, there's no maps. And the British are coming up because they know they're going to be up there somewhere. And they clash. Now the Americans take the worst of it. They're tired, hungry, diseased, and the British light infantry are hard men. Mostly they were about 5'4". One that I've researched was 65 years old, and he was an officer in the light infantry. How hard must that man have been? I swear he had roller skates, the way he got around. And in the middle of the night, you just go at each other. You got to make sure it's not your friend. And both disengage. They back away, which is what should have happened. And they lay on their arms all night long. They go back to their lines. They're starting to spread out, form, go back to their units, and try to get some sleep. And I can tell you, they're not getting much sleep. Okay, the British commanders. Cornwallis, brilliant tactician. His career goes on to India. He makes a fortune there in India, but very sound tactician. Had developed incredibly good intelligence resources. Then you got Webster 33rd, which is actually Cornwallis' regiment. He gets paid for being Cornwallis. He gets paid for being the regimental commander of the 33rd. This was common. They would double, triple, and dip. And Major Dancy, we're lucky to have these. Rowden is young. He's 25 years old when this happens. And he's brilliant. He just loves war. And very, very good at it. Okay, you can hiss and boo. Tarleton. There's about 6 different paintings of him. This is in his light dragoon, and he was in his, late 20s, I think. And George Hanger was his executive officer. He wrote about the American rifleman. He was seriously impressed. Most British officers, the rifleman gets one shot, it takes 60 seconds to load. And what happens is a British soldier can fire at least 3, sometimes 4 rounds a minute. Now this is closer to 80 yards. A rifleman can hit you at about 100. The difference is, and I know this from experience, when you want to wet yourself in combat and you think you're a really good marksman, like a modern sniper, you're doing this because deer don't shoot back. So the American riflemen, yes, they had some great successes. Cowpens, they were used effectively, but mostly they were held in contempt by the British. And the British light infantry often had rifles. Go figure. The right tool for the right job. Okay, order of battle, again, if you want to slide. These are all the men he has. He has over 2,000. And a lot of them were taken out of the hospital at Camden. They were ill. Some of them came up from 96, down from 96. Others came up from Charlestown. And here's what they really looked like. In August, this is what their uniforms would have looked like. So these are all modern renditions, like they're right out of the parade ground. But by that time, this is what they really did with them. They got new uniforms once a year, usually in December. So you would take what you had, you would patch it, make it work. A lot of the Americans, of course, you've heard go barefoot. Okay, after the night battle, Gates orders a frontal assault with the militia. This was an incredibly stupid idea. So what he does, he's facing the British. On his left, he puts the militia. Remember, they're diseased, hungry, don't have much ammunition. Now the British on the other side, on their right, they put their best troops on the right. They always do. Standard operating procedure. So what happens is they display, which means they form their regiments across the road. The militia to the left-hand side, facing toward Camden, and the Continentals, which are really good troops at this time, from Maryland and Delaware. They're really good troops. And they get to within about 80 yards. And that's, you want to be a little closer with a smooth bore musket, but you can hit the guy next to you that you were aiming at. Somebody's going to catch a bullet. And when the British came up against the American Continentals, what happens is they took serious casualties because the Continentals, the Americans, were very disciplined. They wait till they got close and then fired. In the 33rd, one report says about half of them were injured, killed or injured. Now at that point, they fired both sides put the bayonets on. At this point, the militia are skedaddling. They're just running beat. Everything's coming off, throwing everything. They're jumping into the swamps, trying to get away. They're drowning in the swamps. They're being slashed to death by Tarleton. And this goes on for 22 miles. In the meantime, the regulars are going at it. Okay, here's one of the really good quotations. I can't read it in this glare. My apologies. So anyways, the militia breaks early, and a bunch of them talk about this. They said, well, Gates says, well, I tried to rally them. He didn't. Some of the officers tried to rally them, but it was too late to do that.
Is that any better?
Slightly, but I still got a lot of glare from this angle. Okay. This is from a guy who was actually there. The discharge and loud roar soon became general from one end of the line to the other. This is the British regulars, the hardcore guys, shooting at the militia. Amongst other things, he wets himself, and I've seen people do this in combat. I confess that I was the first that fled. He's not embarrassed to say he saved his own life by running. Everyone I saw was about to do the same. That's how the panic starts, even in modern warfare. The guy next to you is the reason you stay there and fight. You have all these great patriotic reasons of being in the Army or the Marines or whatever Army you're in, but it comes down to the guys that share the same spoon. The guys you sleep with, you eat with. One starts backing up, and you're looking and go, oh, blimey. And then he backs up, and you're going, I'm out of here too. When he's running, pretty soon everybody panics and runs. Gates, the militia broke so early and scattered in so many directions upon their retreat that very few have fallen into the hands of the enemy, which was not true. 700 non-commissioned officers and soldiers of the Maryland Division have rejoined the Army. The Continentals managed to, in some sort of order, retreat when this happens. Because the British are coming in with a bayonet, and Tarleton and the Highlanders are coming around their side and their back. They've got nothing left to do. Okay, Continentals hold firm. Again, these guys, the Continentals, they were great. This is what the battlefield really looks like, especially in August. The cannon, and that's me on the cannon crew, you got a haze because you got this high canopy. And the ground is sort of semi-damp. So the cannon smoke, the fog of battle. A few minutes you have to stop shooting just to let the smoke clear to see where the enemy is or where they've gone to. So the Continentals, they hold firm. They're bayonet to bayonet, which is rare with the British. And because they really weren't trained for it, but they learned enough to go toe-to-toe with the British bayonet. DeKalb is actually holding all this together. He's up there in his fancy German uniform. He's got a steel helmet that was buried with him and then dug up, and it disappeared into history. And they buried him with full military honors with the dead British officers. And if you come to Camden, I'll show you exactly where the hole that they buried him. But that's how they identified it. And then you've got the funny here. This is supposedly a modern rendition of DeKalb being taken down. He had, memory serves, 11 wounds. He had 11 wounds total. 7 were from swords and bayonets, and he had 1 musket wound. He lasted 2 days before he passed away. He was mortally wounded. I may have that in here. Okay, this is where, and you can see the smoke of the battle again. Tarleton comes rushing in with his cavalry, and he also has light infantry with him. These guys used to ride double on the horses, sometimes hold the horse's tail. These guys were serious marathon runners. So they're coming in on an angle behind the Americans. It's called flanking, or enfilade. And so he comes in, and then the 71st Highlanders, and these are crack troops. They're coming in at the same time, and they're just smacking right into the American regulars, the Continentals. At that point, the battle's over. There's nothing more that a group of American Continentals can do. They're simply totally different. Okay, somewhat in good order. Here were the men who were left of the 1st and 2nd Brigades. That's Maryland and Delaware, formed 2 battalions. At the 1st Brigade, commanded by Major Anderson, and then 2nd by Major Hartman, the whole amounting to about 800 men. There was the most shocking scene to behold. Our poor scattered troops everywhere dispersed through the country. That means they threw down their weapons, threw in their ammunition, and ran. And the Tories every day picking them up. So 22 miles is when Tarleton stopped chasing them. So they ran, hiding for 22 miles to get back up to North Carolina. And then their wagon trains were captured. The numbers vary. Between 300 and 450 wagons were captured. The attack began, which continued for some time, very severe. That means it was hot and heavy. That's an understatement. But they were repulsed on all sides with great loss, leaving their cannons. Never was there a more complete British victory. Cayce skedaddles. A lot has been written on this over the years. He's had some apologists like Pickens, one of the militia colonels, and he wasn't even there, but yet he writes, Gates was right, Gates did this, he did everything right. A three-day panic horse ride, 180 miles to Hillsborough, where he started from. Gates says, I endeavored, he was court-martialed, by the way, a court of honor. I endeavored to rally the militia at some distance. No. But the enemy's cavalry continued perhaps the rear. They ran like torrents and bore all before them. That was Tarleton chasing. It's like he's stopping periodically trying to rally his men. Now, after his court-martial, he was found somewhat negligent, but who could they replace him with? So they're not going to strip him of his rank. What they did is they just put him aside an admin, which happens. Alexander Hamilton wrote these cutting lines. And Hamilton, if you've ever seen the play with all the black actors, that's the guy we're talking about. He started the first American bank. He was a Federalist. He never liked Gates. Again, this was all political. But there ever in the instance of a general running away, as Gates has done, from his whole army, and was there ever so precipitous a flight, 180 miles in 3 days, and a half does admiral credit the activity of a man at his time in life, because he was in his about 60. But it disgraces the general and the soldier. And this is his political rivals. Now, what happens afterwards? Tarleton chases him. About 400 baggage with everything, weapons, ammunition, traveling forges, food that was mostly spoiled. And here's the British versions of what they captured. And you'll see there's a big discrepancy between the two of them. And that's because the American records were never accurate or kept. And what happens after it's all over, and this is the official historian version, the British victory, estimated casualties, 2,224. It varies a little bit. The Americans killed, captured, or missing was almost 2,000. Again, that number varies widely. The British killed, wounded, or captured was only 324. What a lopsided victory that is. Okay, Charles Baxley, before he died, tasked me with finding out what happens after the battle. And some of you may be aware, we buried soldiers we found on the battlefield. They had a great big giant procession. The American Army was involved, flyovers, hundreds of reenactors. I had the British Highland Regiment come down as an honor guard because I had connections up there. And basically what happens is they leave you where you drop. So the American prisoners were taken out and told to bury the body. August again, a couple days after the battle. A lot of flies, a lot of wild hogs, raccoons, everybody's out there and it's just stinky. So the Americans come out and they'll find a low spot and just shovel leaves over them. They're always finding little bits and bones. The critters like to gnaw on the bones. So even in modern times, if there's a cadaver someplace and it's only a skeleton, you start looking down rabbit holes and raccoon nests and places looking for pieces of the bones to reassemble. So these guys, the Americans, are buried in the Colonial Cemetery in Camden. You'll see a sign for that. The British, they're going to hopefully put him back where he was. And on the History Channel, Dan Snow came out and did an hour-long program on it. And again, if you want that information, leave me your email and I'll send you those links. Now, with the British soldier that they found out of the 14, he was buried about 18 inches down. And he still had his regimentals on. Normally, the bodies are stripped for anything useful. And his buddies, the guys he lives with, the guys that shared the same spoon, came out, found his body and buried it. And maybe even said a prayer over him. We don't know. but we do know that his friends came and buried him, which was typical. It's called a mess. It's the 5 guys you live with for your 30 years of service. If you're a regular British soldier, it's 30 years. Just like a Roman soldier, you're in for 30 years. So these guys are the most important people in your life. Okay, right after the Battle of Camden, 2 days later, Sumter has interdicted a big supply column and reinforcements. And what happens is he's caught with his pants down, literally and figuratively. He did put out sentries. Tarleton, who has recovered from this 22-mile chase, the horses are arrested because they were blown. It's a horse phrase, a good way to knows anything about cavalry. That horse just ain't going further. He's just done. And he's like, that's it. I'm just staying right here. So once they recovered the horses, he's chasing Sumter. He knows Sumter's on the other side of the Wateree River, on this side of the river. And a strange, fancied sense of security has been either sleeping, cooking, or bathing in the stream, as he was taken completely by surprise at 2 in the afternoon, August 18th. Tarleton had pushed on for Rocky Mount. His men were exhausted, Sumter's, but he picked 100 dragoons and 60 infantry. These are the marathon runners. In great distance, and leaving the others with their 3-pounder. I can't get something good if you know how to use it. So what he's doing is, if necessary, rush forward to the attack. Tarleton doesn't waste any time. He's impetuous. He's always going to go ahead. That's why he lost to Cowpens. He just didn't take the time to think it through. And they captured the baggage train. They captured all the prisoners, and basically captured everybody that was in the militia with Sumter. Basically destroyed Sumter's command. Now, shortly after this, I took the slide up, Marion has captured a British supply train that had Continental prisoners from the Battle of Camden. And he caught them on the road in between fortifications. And when he released the Continentals, they were all on parole. And he said, well, come with us, join the militia, you will get back in the fight. He said, no, we gave our word, we're done fighting. And he's going like, what? So no, we signed documents, we gave our word of honor, we're on parole. Until we're exchanged, we are out of this fight. So they're going down to Charlestown to good food, and nobody's shooting at them. That's a good deal. Okay, almost done. What came next? Musgrove Mills, Kings Mountain, Blackstock Plantation, Cowpens. Tarleton blew it there. And that was the beginning of the race to the end. Kind of obscure if you're really into Cornwallis is moving up to North Carolina, and eventually goes to Virginia and Yorktown. And the British after that, after Yorktown, the world turned upside down. The French fleet comes in, he's trapped, the British fleet is out chasing money, privateers, so the admirals and sailors can get rich. The French fleet comes in, the French army comes in. Washington could have never done this on his own. So the whole British army surrenders. And you can see from this relatively accurate painting, all these red lines are thousands and thousands of British soldiers. So the artist who did this actually did a good job for the time period. And at that point, here in South Carolina, all these little posts from 96 coming down from all the way down through Camden, down through Nelson's Ferry, all the way back to Charleston, and they stay there for a year. Now, one of the interesting things was they asked one of the American commanders that, why did you keep the pressure on the British? Because they were sending out forage teams. And he said, because we never thought they would really leave. They were just waiting for more troops to come in. So we just tried to keep the pressure on. But we never thought they would leave. Now, again, if you want these slides, these are the main books. Jim Paiush, a friend of mine, a great book. And I actually have a couple copies of his books up here for sale. These are the ones you want to look at. The ones at the bottom are rip-offs. Put Jim's book, put new covers on them, and pirated verbatim. They did that some articles I wrote back in the 90s that I published in the UK. What are you going to do? I mean, lawyers are expensive. Any lawyers in here? You know you're expensive. So do not buy these books. Go to websites for information. Again, leave me your email or send me your email. And these links will take you to some really, really good sites. And last but not least, where did you go? Okay, I have a mouse problem. Here we go. It's getting there.
Something might happen, but it fell off here.
Yeah, right. Oh, almost right down. Story of my life. Okay, YouTube. I'm kind of addicted to YouTube now. If it's not there now, it'll be there later. If you like programs you grew up with, you can find it. It'll be there. If not today, it'll be there tomorrow. Again, send me an email or leave me your email, and I'll send these off to you. But these are all very, very good videos. And I'm right on time. Hey. And finally, questions. And I covered a lot really fast.
Yeah,
Sir.
early on, you talked about fortifications being directed at certain distances, because that's only as far as oxen or horses could go.
Pretty
Is
much.
that what 96 was? Because I've been there, and it's kind of the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, the Star Fort there was a major logistics center for the backcountry, the upcountry there. And imagine you're bringing supplies in from Charlestown, going 12 miles a day, and you have to log road. If you're on the Savannah River, when I lived in Savannah, we did a lot of archaeological work. Every ferry crossing is fortified. You know, all the major ones are fortified. And for good reasons, because they're going to get raided. You've got troops waiting, you've got supply wagons, they're easy pickings. So you're coming up, you got Dorchester, you've got all these, I should put a slide together, that basically the logistics chain going up to 96 or up towards Chiraw, you have to have these supply lines. And the further you go, the less men you have, because you have to garrison them. Fort Mott, my original regiment was there. There was a supply. And you see these a lot. No one's really dealt with it. I did one lecture, I don't know if you're there or not, on transportation. And we did water and land transportation, where I actually broke down the numbers, distance, how far a horse can go, how far the oxen can go. If somebody wants, I'd be happy to do that lecture, but that's 2 parts. And again, no one's dealt with it except me. And that was a Charles Baxley project. Charles was the kind of guy, he would suggest, and you knew it was an order. It was that simple. Oh, Kim, why don't you look into this? Well, yes, sir. Other questions?
Are there many?
Look.
Yes, sir. Are you a reenactor?
I was. I gotten old.
Did you do American and British, or?
I've never put on an American uniform until I joined the cannon crew that we have in Camden. We go all over the state doing programs. And so I put on an American artillery uniform. Sometimes I'll put on the British because they were exactly the same. But being a loyalist, I have somewhat of an aversion to being an American. I'll do it, but I don't reenact anymore. I mean, when I retired from the Marines in '09, I was gone a lot. I came back, injuries. I just didn't want to go out and run around with the kids anymore. And I really love them. I'm involved in the reenactment. Every November, mark this in your calendars, is the big reenactment north of Camden. Not at historic Camden. We outgrew that site years ago. It's a big plantation, and the owners let us put in internet connections, plumbing. They built us a redoubt, an earthen fortification, that, just like the Romans, at the end of a march, if there wasn't a redoubt, the soldiers, within 2 hours, could dig up 50 men, and make a 25 by 25 square fortification. And they cut down all the branches and made modern, what would be modern barbed wire. Take all the branches, cut the points, and lay them out like this. So you have to like thread yourself through there. And in the meantime, they're shooting at you. So it goes back to the Romans. Somebody else have a question? Back, sir.
The way I understand it, Native American remains were found in these.
Yes, we suspect
I
that.
haven't heard anything lately about what became of them. Why, they say there was no Native Americans involved in the battle. Why was he there? Is
They
anything
think,
on that lately?
well, he had the DNA. And I'm not up to date with it. I went sick for a year. And I've been in contact with a lot of the native tribal organizations, trying to get them to come out to the reenactment because we don't have any. Up north, we had guys from the Iroquois Nation. Everybody would come out. I mean, these warriors came out. They weren't big fat white guys in red ochre. These guys were skinny, painted. They were all native, and brilliant, brilliant reenacting and historians. So they're trying to find somebody. They don't know what his affiliation is. He could have been Catawba. He could have been Cherokee. He could have been mixed race. That's a bit of a political hot potato at the moment. Personally, I think they should, if the tribes don't come forward with it, put him with the other guys in the Colonial Cemetery. And the British guy, they're putting him back on the battlefield. And hopefully we'll get a marker for him. And I only have a few $1,000s for it. Other
I
questions?
can follow up on that. I was speaking with Jim Lake last night. They don't allow DNA on that particular person, but they can tell his data by the way his teeth were arranged.
Okay.
And the Catawba are involved with him, and his body is still in Camden.
Excellent. Thank you.
Steve.
So the DNA on the British soldier, just as a quick aside, everybody in the UK, England, Wales, Scotland, has to have by law their DNA on file. If there's a crime, it proves that you didn't do it. Backwards from the way we look at things. The UK has gone pretty weird over the last decade or so. And human rights, the rights of Englishmen have been seriously trampled on. Because they don't have a written constitution to rely on. It's a verbal constitution, so it's easy to screw with it. So hopefully we get the DNA from Jim's lab, and I had contacts, because I was a military policeman for a long time, with Scotland Yard. So we can send those DNA results to them and see if they can find their ancestors. There's a good possibility that could happen. Very good possibility. Other questions? Sir?
Do you have access to rolls of British soldiers and
Yes.
Irish volunteers?
Yes. We know just about everybody who was in the regiment.
It's come down through my family history that my relative fought for Tarleton. He was, brought over from Ireland, went back to Ireland, and came back over here in 1787. So
A lot of guys did.
I got a cousin that researched the archives in London, didn't find it, so I was kind of looking.
There's not much in Tarleton's roles that have survived, because again, he took all his records back with him. He had to be audited, and they disappeared when he went into politics. We don't know. Volunteers of Ireland, we know pretty much everybody who was in that. 33rd, we know just about every name that's in there, because the British kept immaculate records.
Okay, I'll email you and hopefully.
Please do, because there's Todd Braisted, who I've known since the 80s. He's the go-to guy for provincials. If he doesn't know, nobody knows. I mean, when one of us goes to the UK, to the archives, we always put out the word to our fellow historians, what are you looking for? And then, we'll make copies, and they pay us for them, but that way, you don't have to keep making the trip back and forth. But Todd Braisted is the go-to guy. And
Aside from that, how Todd Braisted work is coming on the letters of Rodney? He was editing those.
it's in progress, about is all I can say, because I've offered to help when I regain my health. I'll have to send an email and ask him, because we're all
going to a DAR meeting, and the one from the 250 commission says their first volume's done.
Marion?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's online, and it's searchable. So now we have every document of Marion's to and from published. And there was one, Do Mischief, Be Cool, or
Something like that, yeah.
yeah, that was some of the documents, but he didn't cover all of them. And basically the ones he did cover really weren't useful. Somebody over here had a question? No,
I'm
sir?
gonna, kind of bounce off of what he just asked about the British records. The ones that you guys have access to, is that strictly for British soldiers that served in these battles in North Carolina, or, I mean, South Carolina that covered all?
We have them for every soldier in North America and the British Army. And why is because every month they had to have a master roll. Every morning, this is typical Army, every morning you have a morning report. Who's sick, who's deserted, who's going on what details.
Good.
So that has to be documented. That goes up to the company commander. Now he fills out from all the platoons. Then it goes up to the battalion commander. He fills out his forms, and they were all pre-printed. Then it goes up to the regimental, which is mostly administrative. And then they make copies of everything. And then it goes to the higher headquarters. So it's all paperwork. From the time of the Romans right up through my military service, there was always a document. So every soldier is annotated. He has to get paid every month. He has his clothing issued. He has to pay for his food. They have to deduct money for his hospital when he retires or is wounded and invalided. So tons and tons of records. The Americans, sloppy, sloppy, sloppy. And they were too busy fighting a war and mainly losing it up until the last time. But the British, it's easy. I mean, we can go back hundreds of years in the British Army and still find the same document.
I'd like to be in contact about that. I had a great-grandfather, Scottish great-grandfather, that served in the British unit around Fayetteville. And they left him on the road for sick, but he recovered, of course. But,
Well, illness down here,
Yeah,
at any time, 50% were sick. And Camden was a big hospital site. And, but any time, because of the diseases down here, both sides just suffered miserably. But contact me and I'll get you the information where to start.
Sure.
Ancestry.com, now you have to pay to do it. It's owned and operated by the Mormon Church, Church of Latter-day Saints. In their religion, they have to go back and baptize their ancestors. And what they did was when they send out missionaries and they go to, say, an archive here in Columbia, they come in and they copy everything. They come with all the right equipment and they copy everything in that building. And then it goes back to headquarters and then it gets put out online. So you can find amazing things in there. Sir?
And if I could plug our hosts here, if I'm not
Please do.
mistaken, there's an institutional membership to Ancestry.com, correct?
I was just.
Can't they
looking
go
that up
straight
on
to
our
the
website.
reference desk?
Yes.
Excellent.
So
So,
if you have a library card, and you can log into Ancestry through the Lexington County Library's website.
They have tons of records, British, American, easy to use. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
It just occurred to me that the difference is in record keeping between the two. I suspect that there were more records kept, made than could be kept because there were no archives and things, whereas Britain has a long history of those going back to the Middle Ages. So they had places to put them and keep them in people's name. But America's starting out on other things.
Yeah.
So we hope people keep looking for and finding new things.
Oh, we do always.
Because a lot of new things have come up.
We're constantly, reenactors, historians are constantly pushing that envelope. And with the Americans, and the British, a lot of British documents stayed within the families if they were aristocratic. And with the Americans, our biggest source of information, and mostly hearsay and bad memories, are the pension statements. A little bit of a side. The word patriot is in our lexicon now. It's wrong. They were rebels. They could be patriotic in the writings, but they were never called patriots until 1832, when the lawyers started writing pension papers. That's when that word comes into our lexicon. I love the little tribute there. So now with those pension statements, these guys are old and they're going back on memory. You know, I think I was within Marion for 3 months, and then I went home and brought in the corn, and then I was, I think, with this captain, and then a lot of times you would have somebody else, his captain if he was still alive, or somebody who served with him, validate that. The British had the same thing for their pensions. A lot of them were rejected because they just out lied. Oh, this sounds familiar today, Social Security and other disability. Gee, some things just never change. Other questions? I think you were dead on time. I thank you for coming. And I hope to do this
A
again.
couple of last announcements here. One, Kim mentioned several times, he'd be glad to send you information. In all the rush at the last minute, I neglected to tell y'all, we have a sign-in sheet right here. If you have been to one of our programs before and left us your email, we got it. But if you haven't, please sign in and leave your email address. Also, want to mention again, we've got